Hidden amongst humanity's many worlds, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of cults, and none are scarier than Genestealer cults. In today's deep dive, we're going to talk about two of my favorite Genestealer cults, starting with the Cult of the Bladed Cog. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the like button for more deep dive videos. The Bladed Cog is a Genestealer cult that exemplifies the hybridizations of two deadly factions, the Tyranids and the Adeptus Mechanicus. The story of this cult begins on the planet of Feynminster Gamma, an industrial hub ruled over by the priesthood of Mars. This humble planet provided most of its resources to the different forge worlds scattered across their system. The planet itself was not as grand as the rest of the domains of the Adeptus Mechanicus, but eventually in the 41st millennium, it caught the attention of the tech priest Dominus Ovid Threncium, also known as the Great Miser. His vision was to use the planet of Feynminster Gamma as a refuge and a launch-off point for his macro-clad armies and their crusade across the sector. In his data slates, the world was marked as a bountiful source of energy and manpower. Yet the planet, despite the tech priest's assumptions, proved to have a remarkably low energy yield. Since the opening of the major warp storm in the neighboring Vacadin system, many of the Feynminster Gamma's meager genetoriums had been running on emergency protocols simply to keep artificial lighting shining bright. The populace reasoned that if the baleful light of the warp storm was eclipsed by the conventional loom globes closer to home, none would stare too long at the celestial phenomenon, and hence countless citizens would be spared the madness and despair. When the tech priest Dominus found the paltry Genetorium district struggling even to keep the cities lit around the clock, his hopes of securing a forward base deeper into space was dashed. In consultation with the Fulgurite advisors, he decided to take a rich harvest of bioelectricity from the planet's living population instead, using them as fuel. The technosenses that followed tried to create a catalog of those who had bionic enhancements and those that did not. Instead, it saw tens of thousands of citizens leaving the halls of the Adeptus Mechanicus as a stumbling near comatose husks. This slowly created civil unrest across the planet until it bubbled to the surface as a powerful eruption that could not be denied. Using industrial tools, improvised weaponry, and rudimentary guns purchased on the shadow market, the slave workers of the planet rose up against the agents of the cult Mechanicus who had sought to bleed them dry. They were hopelessly outmatched, however. Extermination servitor details and Skitarii macroclads were sent to eradicate the worst of the slave revolts, though in his greed for more energy, the tech priest Dominus spared the lives of as many people as he could, and hence let the seeds of a new rebellion grow amidst the ashes of battle. For a while, the Adeptus Mechanicus regained control, but the atmosphere of oppression and paranoia that resulted was fertile ground for a spread of an underground religion. Unfortunately, in the midst of this political turmoil, a pure-tide Genestealer was unwittingly born in the planet's surface by a cargo freighter known as the Red Spark. A widespread cult of deliverance soon followed. The xenoform was seen as proof that there were other cultures and even other intelligent species beyond the clouds that were surely less cruel and tyrannical than the Adeptus Mechanicus. The crew of the Red Spark was adamant that salvation could be found in the worship of this unusual cargo. Slowly at first, but with gathering speed, whispers of a new deliverance movement spread throughout the entire populace. No longer would the cultists be content to be part of the same heartless and unceasing machines as their rulers. Instead, they would become a blade, the code brands and electus with which the planet's tech priest overseers had marked their citizen workers were in many cases altered with illicit ink dens to jibe with the new imagery of the emergent cult. The Omnissiah's sacred cog Mechanicus, the icon of the Adeptus Mechanicus, was adapted to better resemble the jag-spine emblem with which the creed marked out its faithful members. Slogan tattoos became common. They were worn across the collarbone or spine, each bearing a message that a believer in the Martian creed would consider shocking and blasphemous in the extreme. Every solar hour, the forged temples of the planets produced a new clutch of battle tanks and servitor pattern transports. These too were taken by the cult and dabbed with this rebellious insignia. The common populace were not the only ones to fall under the spell of the Cult of the Bladed Cog. Though it took the mental onslaught of the Genestealer Patriarch itself to achieve it, many Skitarii were brought into the embrace of the cult. Their electrospore signatures and nospheric auras gained entry into many areas that should have been forbidden, and allowed the cult to spread unchecked. With these cyborg inductees gradually corrupting the brotherhood of their own clades, the seeds of the populace's grim salvation were sown. The Day of Ascension was triggered only when every parameter run through exhaustive simulations by the former Skitarii Alpha, who acted as the cult's nexus, pointed towards victory. With mathematical precision, the Tech Priest Dominus' regimes were overthrown, liquefied by a biomutative bullet so that the cult's nemesis could know the terrible glory of unbound flesh before he died. Sadly, on that day, the broodkin of the Bladed Cog, the entire populace of the planet, completely swapped one set of cruel masters for another, though they are yet to learn that their new overlords ultimately answer to a force that is indefinitely worse than that of their former rulers. Now let's move on to a Genestealer cult that has struck humanity at its heart, the cult known as the Hive Cult. This Genestealer cult has infiltrated the Segmentum Solar by not only corrupting the Underhive and the criminal enterprises that flourish so closely to Holy Terra, but it has managed to invade the Astra Militarum by implanting agents of the cult within the Imperial Guard regiments. This cult began on the world of New Gitlim, a hive world located on the outskirts of the Segmentum Solar. The Hive Cult is a prime example of a Genestealer invasion that spreads like wildfire across a densely populated Imperial planet. The planet in this case is New Gitlim, a hive world that has 13 ancient hive cities upon its pollution-blasted surface. Each of these vast man-made mountains harbors tens of billions of souls, and all but one have been conquered by the Hive Cult. Only Hive Tyranids holds out, its lesson learned as an expense of every population center. Even then, its lower levels are constantly besieged, and its future looks bleak indeed. The cult's emergence on New Gitlim began with a spat of ritual killings, a warlike Underhive family that sprang up around a brood of pure-strain Genestealers. These Xeno specimens were originally purchased from a self-appointed Xenosaur known as Dionysus the Great Curator. They were later smuggled into the Hive City by a ganger looking for a secret weapon to use against his enemies. Brought swiftly into the sway by the Genestealer they called the First Father, the gangers went on a warpath and soon surpassed their rivals. Rather than traditional routes of infiltrating, kidnapping, blackmailing, and stealing from their enemies to grow slowly in the darkness, the cultists went straight for the throat. They slaughtered one rival gang after another, taking over large swaths of an area known as the Sump. The more dominant gangs that had established themselves in these lower levels saw what was happening and eventually put aside their differences to defend against the Hive Cult. But faced with the First Father and his sharp-eyed Genestealers, who could squeeze through narrow pipes and swim across lakes of toxic spill to attack from unexpected angles, the gangers were overmatched. In the meantime, the aristocracy of the Hive City had been infected by the cult's savage ambition. Its magus, Vakor Mai, was at the center of this operation. He brought the ruling dynasties into line one by one, swaying them with his psychic influence and uncanny charisma. There was one, however, a rich hiver named Thorn, who habitually wore a helm of Xeno design, who did not fall to his wiles. In the hours of darkness, Vakor Mai shook off his robes and assassinated Thorn while he was in his bathhouse, cutting the dignitary's throat with a razor-sharp symbol of the cult and leaving it as his calling card. It was the first of many such killings, each part of a wider initiative to remove obstacles from Mai's path. Though often half seen in the darkness, he was never caught. With those first acts of killing, the urban myth of the White Creeper was born amongst the New Gitlim's aristocrats. When the cult grew large enough to spawn a neophyte hybrid assassin known as Sanctus, Vakor Mai baited the operative to go into the Hive Spire and kill those that were too psychically powerful to fall to his wiles. The legend of the White Creeper grew and spread from hive to hive, though in truth it was several individuals working in concert. Over time, gene sects were established in 12 out of the 13 ancient hive cities, but the spread of the cult did not stop there. New Gitlim's principal human exports, skilled roachworm silkers, and recruits for the Astra Militarum spread the infection of the Hive Cult from the outer worlds of the Segmentum Solar to its heartlands. With many Imperial Guard regiments recruiting from the gangers of these worlds, the Hive Cult spread even further. Hidden gang signs and electotus worn under the skin enabled those who owed allegiance to the New Gitlim dynasty to identify one another in secret and spread their creed in the endless solar hours of inactivity that typified life between engagements for the Astra Militarum units. The sheer vastness of the Astra Militarum and the desperate insanity of the wars they fought helped the Hive Cult to evade the suspicion of the Commissariat in nearly every conflict zone they infiltrated. Those who owed secret allegiance to the Hive Cult made for focused, disciplined Imperial soldiers, albeit on the strange side, but none looked too deeply into their history, for the lords of the Astra Militarum cared little about the native cultures from which their foot soldiers hailed. With the Imperial Guard boasting 1,000 different ethnicities, colors, and variant Imperial creeds amongst its numbers, it proved easy enough for the cult's neophyte hybrids and brood brothers to further their organization's wider agenda in secret. The Hive Cult's leaders prioritize warriors amongst their recruits, regardless of where they come from. Their logic is sound, for should a new recruit have access to a sword, a gun, or even better a tank, their contribution to the uprising will be all the more formidable on the day of ascension. If the entire cult is so armed and armored with the finest weapons the Imperium of Man can provide, it will overcome all before it in a spectacular surge of violence. Each gun stolen from its official home is worth 2 on the day of insurrection. When the Hive Cult would carry out an insurrection on a world, many of the in-system Astra Militarum regiments sent in to put down the uprising had already thousands of members bearing the worm form upon their skin. These agents of the cult betrayed their regiments from within, and with armored squadrons and even super heavy tanks turning to fight alongside the rising tide of the underworld, the Imperial Guard tasked with restoring order are often overcome in a matter of few bloody days. Sadly, those forces of the Sisters of Battle and the Adeptus Astartes fighting alongside them find themselves suddenly betrayed, and with the betrayal a long time in the planning, it is usually as lethal as it is sudden. The Hive Cult's chillingly effective manner of taking over territory has proven incredibly effective time and time again. Coordinated by gifted Nezo strategists who marshal and distribute their faithful with military precision, they have endless ranks of soldiery marching to the beat of the First Father's drum. They have unparalleled access to warships, aerial assets, and methods of reaching the battle zone in which they flourish. More than that, with thousands of infected gangers working in the lower levels of Imperial metropolises to undermine the planet from bottom up, they can attack society at every level simultaneously. Some whisper that the Sol system itself has come under threat by the Hive Cult, for reports of their presence in the Segmentum Solar are becoming ever more common. The icon of the bladed worm form is carried by the Hive Cult's members, whether they be the brood brothers of the New Gidlam's Astra Militarum regiment or the infected hive gangs themselves. So militarized is the cult that the icons themselves are weaponized, appearing in stylized form of knuckle dusters, throwing stars, or daggers. They are often used to slay those who stand in the cult's way, an act rich in symbolism that harkens back to the blue-blooded kills first started by the Magus Volker Mai. This icon has been spotted within the Sol system, and some rumors state that pilgrims bearing the Hive Cult sigil have been spotted on Holy Terra itself. But the cult still has a very long way to go before a full-scale insurrection can even be contemplated anywhere near the Sol system. The cult derives its power from the Imperial Guard regiments they've been able to infiltrate, but these regiments will never be sent to Terra. If anything, they would be sent to defend the planets on the boundaries of the Segmentum. The cult's best bet is to slowly invade the criminal underworld that exists within the system, but even then, the competition is extremely fierce. The Hive Cult will continue to spread its influence in the neighboring systems until it finds a breach to the Imperium's most well-protected planet. And those are just 2 Genestealer cults out of a multitude found in the Genestealer Codex and the Tyranid Codex. If you guys want more lore on Genestealers, let me know in the comment section below. I hope you guys have been enjoying the other videos we've been posting. Check them out on the YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, tell your friends, so share this video, and hit the like button to let us know you want more deep dive videos. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was Garsh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Oh, I did the